sending the Chiefs to the Super Bowl. And in light of that, I would like to amend my fun fact introduction from last week. I will amend my I can install my own tile and hardwood floors fun fact to Travis Kelsey is my constituent. So you all have buttons at your desk that say Kansas House District 20 loves 87. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the indulgence.
Thank you, Representative, for that. And on that front, has become a tradition of this committee this time of year. We do wish the Bills Mafia another great off season. We hope they ate a lot of great barbecue while they were here. But hope they have a great off season and look forward to seeing them this time next year. We're going to start off with bill introductions. Do we have any bill introductions from the committee? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have RS 0447 concerning Capers 3 moving into Capers 2, and I'm introducing this on behalf of Representative Robin Essex.
Committee, do we have any questions or objection? Seeing none, that is introduced. Committee, do we have any other bill introductions? Seeing none, do we have any from the gallery? Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have RS 0234, and it has to do with Capers members having the option to receive their pay monthly or bi-monthly.
Committee, are there any questions or objections? Seeing none, that is introduced. Thank you, Representative. Do we have any other bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on. Committee, I am actually under the weather today. So what's going to happen is I'm actually going to go down to my office so I don't expose anybody else to the germs I currently am carrying, except for Representative Shu. He can get sick. It's fine. Vice Chair Steens is going to take over and run the committee today. So please kind of follow along with her and give her a little bit of grace. But with that, I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Steens. You can take this, Chair.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We are going to start off today with a presentation from the Kansas Department of Credit Unions, Julie Murray, the Administrator. Thank you for being here today. Good morning.
Okay. I am the administrator for the Department of Credit Unions. I've held that position since 2022. Prior to that, I came to the agency in 2019 as an examiner. And before that, I had 13 years of experience with a local credit union. You all have my written testimony, so I thought today I would just hit the highlights. It looks like you have a full schedule and you can ask me any questions you might have. We do have 45 state chartered credit unions. 44 of those are natural person credit unions. That means a credit union that you or I could join. We have one Kansas corporate credit union, and they provide services for our natural person credit unions and credit unions for 6 other states in the Midwest. An interesting thing about the 45 is that lands us right in the middle of the number of state chartered credit unions nationally. Our large states like California and Texas have quite a bit more, but we still have a significant number. We only supervise about $6.5 billion in assets, so that means our credit unions are small compared to nationwide. About half of our credit unions are $20 million or less in assets, and what that means is a small shop that's got 1 or 2 people that work there. So we are entirely fee-funded as an agency. We have 12 FTEs. We have a statutory requirement to do exams every 18 months, but we average about 15 months. We do work with the National Credit Union Administration on scheduling because they are the insurer of our credit unions. And as such, they tend to look at the scheduling a little differently. They look at risk, and so there are some credit unions we look at every 12 months because of their size or complexity. And then some we can go 15 or 18. We do run a risk-based examination program. We look at capital, assets, which is generally loans and investments, management capabilities, earnings, assets and liabilities, and sensitivities. And we rate those on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 I consider to be the least financial risk, and 5 is the most. We do use the NCUA software and program just for consistency with our credit unions. As they'll have the NCUA come and look at them, I think it's easier on our credit unions to use the same program consistently. The numbers that we have is that we currently have about $6.5 billion in assets for our Kansas chartered credit unions, about $5 billion in loans, about $5.5 billion in deposits. Our average delinquency is 1.4%, which seems a little high, but that number is skewed because we have a lot of very small credit unions that may have 1 or 2 delinquent loans, and that is a large percentage of their loan portfolio. If you look at our median, I think it's 66 basis points, which is right in line with the national average. Return on assets is 0.41%, and our average net worth is 14.25, which is a very safe and sound position. That's really the highlights I wanted to share with you, and I'd happily stand for any questions.
Thank you so much, Julie. Okay, committee, do we have any questions? Representative Chu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we seeing the same trend that we saw with the Kansas chartered banks where kind of over time we're getting fewer and fewer, more consolidation?
Absolutely. If you look historically, we're losing, I don't say losing, we're consolidating about 2 per year. And that's pretty much the same consistency through the nation. It has to do with a few things. Again, we talked about my credit unions are very small, and we have a lot of long-term employee, like managers, and it's hard to fill those positions in those rural communities, and sometimes they consolidate. And it's not always a bad thing because the smaller credit unions can't always offer all of the products and services. So what they do is they go shopping for a partner that matches their values and can provide something good for their members. We don't tend to lose branches in those, but we have seen the same consolidation.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Julie, so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next committee, we have the Kansas Credit Union Association. Emily Beam will be presenting. Hi, Emily.
Thank you, Vice Chair Steens, Ranking Member Shu, and the rest of the committee for the opportunity to speak with you about the credit union industry in Kansas. My name is Emily Beam, and I am representing the Kansas Credit Union Association this session, along with Cale Beam, who is seated behind me, and the Federico Durst Consulting Group team. Today, I will provide an overview of our association and what we do to support member credit unions, give a brief history of the industry, a description of the credit union structure, and an illustration of their economic impact and current industry trends. The Kansas Credit Union Association plays a crucial role in the credit union industry. We represent 60 credit unions headquartered in Kansas and the roughly 1.2 million Kansans who are members of those credit unions. As a member of a 5-state league that includes Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas, we are the largest credit union league in the country, offering a wide range of services to our members. Many of you may remember us as the Heartland Credit Union Association, which was just Kansas and Missouri until 2023 when we merged with the other 3 states. While merging created some changes, and changes can be challenging, the overall effect has been very beneficial. We can offer more services and resources to better serve our members and gain insights into what is happening in other states. While advocacy is certainly a significant focus, we also provide a variety of other services. Compliance and regulatory assistance. There are training, resources, and experts standing by to keep credit unions on track. Asset-specific support. We have advisory groups and networking opportunities to engage with peer credit unions of all sizes. Research and statistics. We have on-demand statistical summaries, economic profiles, performance reports, and community or member surveys to help credit unions make informed decisions. And peer group engagement. There are opportunities to participate in collaboration or mentoring programs, councils, chapters, sister societies, and young professional programs, to name a few. The first credit union in the United States was established in 1908 in New Hampshire by Francophone workers whose working hours extended before and after the bank's hours. To have a place to store their money and access financial services, they formed an all-volunteer staff that operated only in the evenings and on federal holidays to serve the Francophone workers in the area. This successful model attracted other unserved and underserved populations, such as low and middle-income families and farmers, who were often denied services by traditional financial institutions. As a result, they began forming credit unions across the country. Today, many groups representing specific industries and companies such as teachers, Boeing employees, healthcare workers, and police officers have all established credit unions. The first credit union in Kansas was founded in 1929 during the Great Depression to serve Postal Service workers. It is still operating today just a few blocks away on Kansas Avenue. In the same year, the Kansas Legislature passed the State Credit Union Act, 5 years before Congress, creating the framework for credit unions to be chartered. Kansas was also one of the first states to establish an independent regulator for credit unions, acknowledging the structural differences between credit unions and for-profit institutions. Credit unions are unique in their structure. Unlike banks and other financial institutions, they are not-for-profit, member-owned cooperatives, similar to agricultural and electric cooperatives, with a strong focus on serving their members. I'll touch on 5 points that highlight their differences. Number 1, they are governed by a volunteer board of directors elected by and from the membership. 2, they are locally owned and operated by credit union members, each member having an equal vote and share in the credit union. 3, profits are returned to the members in form of higher returns on savings, lower rates on loans, lower fees on accounts, and direct dividends. Last year, Kansas credit unions returned over $100 million to their members. One item often brought up is that credit unions themselves don't pay income taxes. That is correct, as they are owned by the members and the members pay taxes on dividends that are earned. Credit unions do pay other taxes such as property taxes and payroll taxes. Number 4, credit unions are prohibited from raising capital from outside sources. Credit unions have capital standards similar to other financial institutions for safety and soundness. However, they must maintain or grow their capital levels through retained earnings. And number 5, they are required to publicly report their finances under IRS requirements for not-for-profit organizations. Despite only holding 11.8% of total deposits in Kansas, credit unions have a significant economic impact. With just under 1.2 million members across the state, 40% of Kansans are credit union members. These institutions employ over 3,600 Kansans, all dedicated to meeting their members' needs. This member-driven mission and the nonprofit status of credit unions enable them to serve low and middle-income families, often overlooked or unqualified by other financial institutions, providing access to essential financial services. In 2024, Kansas credit unions supported their members in several ways, including making over 90,000 loans to Kansans with a credit score of 640 or below, giving over 38,000 small dollar loans to help Kansans bridge shortfalls between paychecks or manage unexpected expenses. This could be a $200 loan for groceries or gas to get through the month. Financial counseling, assistance with budgeting, or financial literacy training provided to over 64,000 Kansans and K-12 students through their credit union, offering over 51,000 SKIPA pays or other loan deferments to help Kansans overcome temporary financial hardships without negatively impacting their credit score, and originating over 570,000 auto loans to Kansans. This representation underscores the vital role credit unions play in enhancing financial security for families throughout Kansas. There has been significant consolidation and mergers among credit unions, similar to the trends observed in banks, resulting in a steady decrease in the number of credit unions. In Kansas, the number of chartered credit unions has dropped from 122 in 2005 to just 66 today. This issue isn't limited to Kansas. Nationally, the number of credit union charters has fallen from 8,854 to 4,645 in the last 20 years, according to the National Credit Union Administration. Several factors are driving this consolidation in the financial services market, including stringent compliance requirements and labor shortages. Many credit unions operate with small staff sizes, making it challenging to fill positions and maintain daily operations when managers leave or retire. Since the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010, more than 150 new regulations have been implemented for financial institutions, further complicating the situation for smaller credit unions. I'd like to close by thanking this committee and the legislature for passing HB 2561, the Credit Union Modernization Act, that last session. This bill updated our statutes to better reflect the modern market. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Kansas Credit Union Association. We look forward to working with you this session to ensure Kansans have access to affordable financial services. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Emily, so much for that presentation. Committee, do we have any questions? Representative Rivas?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if the Vice Chair, sorry. I don't know if this is for Julie or Emily, but so you've gone from 122 to 66. How many physical locations? Because with all the mergers, are we losing the physical locations in the small communities? Are they closing those, or are they still keeping those branches open?
Julie had mentioned too, it sounds like the branches, there's still the same number of branches, but there's less institutions.
Okay, committee, anyone else? Okay, thank you, Emily, so much for your presentation. Okay, next we have reports on the TEFI Act, the Joint Committee on Fiduciary Financial Institutions Oversight. Nicole Fiedler, I hope I said that correct. Our research analyst with the Legislative Research Department. Thank you.
Yes, hello. Hello, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Nicole Fielder, and I'm a research analyst with KLRD. And today, my colleague and I will be going over several of the committee report, the interim committee reports from this past interim. And I get to start with the Joint Committee on Fiduciary Financial Institutions Oversight. It's sometimes colloquially called the TEFI Committee, if you hear that. And I wanted to include just a very short memo about the TEFI Act itself, just for anyone unfamiliar, and if you guys are trying to explain it to anyone who's unfamiliar. So it's a short 1.5 page memo about the Technology-Enabled Fiduciary Financial Institutions Act, which was enacted in 2021 through Senate Sub for House Bill 2074, and it lists the current statutory reference. The bill required the state bank commissioner to issue a charter to the beneficent company, also known as BEN, and established a fiduciary financial institution pilot program with an economic growth zone designated in Harvey County. The chartered TEFI is known as Beneficent Fiduciary Financial, or BFF, and currently BFF is believed to be the only TEFI in the United States. What makes TEFIs distinct is that TEFIs manage alternative assets, defined in statute as professionally managed investment assets that are not publicly traded, including but not limited to private equity, venture capital, leveraged buyouts, special situations, structured credit, private debt, private real estate funds, and natural resources. And I wanted to cover the function of their economic growth zone. So when alternative assets are placed into new Kansas trusts with BEN, 2.5% of the total amount of financing provided is funneled into the Kansas TEFI Economic Growth Trust, which then distributes funding to the following: the Kansas Department of Commerce TEFI Development and Expansion Fund, which funds their seed program and funds the promotion of growth and development for the TEFI industry. And that 2.5% also goes to Beneficent Heartland Foundation. And then just on the page 2 of the memo, it just covers a timeline of some of the legislation and then the various committee meetings. So for the report itself, again, it's titled Report of the Joint Committee on Fiduciary Financial Institutions Oversight to the 2025 Kansas Legislature. It lists the charge there. Pursuant to KSA 464001, the committee is directed to monitor, review, and make recommendations regarding fiduciary financial institutions operations in the state of Kansas and the Fiduciary Financial Institutions Pilot Program, and to receive a report from the Office of the State Bank Commissioner. And they've typically met once a year. So page 3 of the report lists the conclusions and recommendations. I'll be covering these throughout some of the testimony and at the very end there, but that's there for your reference. And I'm going to move on to page 4 of the report. The committee met on November 21st, 2024, and the committee heard from BFF, the State Bank Commissioner, and the Kansas Department of Commerce. In that second column on page 4, the Office of the Revisor of Statutes provided a summary of the statutory requirements under the TEFI Act as it applies to both the TEFI and the OSBC. And the report lists out some of those requirements, and the interim committee testimony would show a more detailed memo if you're curious. And then on to page 5, we get into some of the BFF testimony, and so I do want to cover the bits that are especially relevant to the recommendations. So in the middle of the first column on page 5, the BFF Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board, the BFF President and Chief Fiduciary Officer, and the BFF Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer, and a representative from Crossroads Legal Solutions provide an overview of their recent activities, an update on their operations, and a report on the economic growth zone milestones and achievements and their legislative requests. Towards the bottom of that column, BFF CEO and Chairman of the Board presented information on the nature of the TEFI, its board, and market factors that have slowed industry growth. The CEO described that the alternative assets with which the TEFI works as illiquid assets, such as private equity and structured credit funds, and the TEFI serves to provide liquidity to its clients. The CEO reported that the initial public offerings market and the merger and acquisitions market have shut down over the past few years, reducing their liquidity, but that major institutions expect the markets to reopen in the coming months. And then the CEO listed some company announcements there. And then towards the bottom of that column on page 5, the CEO explained the issues that the company faced after its IPO when the company that held 90% of its shares in a lockup agreement went bankrupt and voided the agreement. He stated the company is now broadly held and the stock is fully distributed. The CEO reported that BFF's first profitable quarter was the first quarter of 2024. He also stated 2 other companies have expressed interest in becoming TEFIs. The CEO concluded his presentation by detailing the economic development projects, including a grocery store in Heston, Kansas, that are supported by BFF's Economic Growth Trust. And then the committee heard from the Chief Operating Officer about the Bank Secrecy Act and compliance examinations. The COO discussed regulatory issues the TEFI faces as a non-traditional financial institution and suggested amending KSA 9-2304, which applies provisions of the Kansas Banking Code to TEFIs to exempt TEFIs from the following, being daily statement and monthly trust statement requirements, a 30-day reporting cadence for call reports, and lending limits. And then the committee heard from the Chief Fiduciary Officer, who explained that 2.5% of BFF revenues is directed to the Kansas TEFI Economic Growth Trust and then is split between Beneficent Heartland Foundation and the Kansas Department of Commerce. And they discussed the following legislative proposals: lowering the application fee to lower the barrier to entry to the TEFI market, update definitions of alternative assets and alternative asset custody accounts to reflect continued modernization and digitalization of asset ownership, revise the definition of charitable beneficiaries and qualified charities under the TEFI Act to include charities, contributions to which are allowable as a deduction pursuant to the section of IRS code, and then 1 or more Kansas nonprofit corporations regardless of their federal income tax treatment. So they were saying that this is last year's bill, Senate Bill 2204. In discussion with committee members, conferees testified that most of the similar economic initiatives had paused over the past several years related to the closing of the IPO and M&A markets. One conferee indicated that at least 2 other states have worked on TEFI legislation in the past, including Illinois and Delaware, and he predicted that other states will reconsider such legislation in the coming months. I'll now move on to the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, which is still on page 6. The commissioner provided a report on the regulatory activities conducted by the OSBC regarding the sole TEFI chartered and existing in Kansas. He acknowledged his previous testimony and reiterated that the legislature granted the charter to BFF during the 22 legislative session. And the commissioner noted that subsequent amendments to the TEFI Act, which was House Bill 2489, and the Act's codification within the Kansas Banking Code. And he also stated that OSBC has not received any additional applications or inquiries from potential TEFI organizers. The TEFI Act established that each TEFI pay an annual assessment of at least $1 million to the OSBC, which then remits all monies to the state treasury. 3/4 of each remittance is credited to the Bank Commissioner Fee Fund, and 1/4 is credited to the TEFI Development and Expansion Fund with the Department of Commerce. And then the commissioner noted that the OSBC is the sole regulator for TEFIs, unlike other financial institutions that have a federal regulatory counterpart. I'm on page 7 now. The commissioner indicated that OSBC had completed 2 examinations of BFF in the previous 12 months and began a 3rd earlier that week. The first 2 examinations focused on information technology systems and compliance with the Bank Secrecy Act and the anti-money laundering laws. He noted that these examination reports are confidential. And the 3rd pending examination will review BFF's administrative and operational practices, and it will evaluate potential areas of risks pertaining to their business model. Skipping ahead just a touch, the commissioner also detailed why it is impossible for them to conduct a meaningful safety and soundness examination, and he details that in his testimony there. And the commissioner suggested that the legislature revisit this provision if a worthwhile safety and soundness examination is desired. The commissioner stated that BFF is one of several subsidiaries of Beneficient. As a holding company, Beneficient actively maintains control of its subsidiaries. The OSBC monitors the financial condition of the holding company through its filings to the SEC. But in recent filings and share prices have indicated significant stress on the company, which could extend to BFF. The commissioner stated that the TEFI Act does not contain any provisions or directions addressing either the voluntary or involuntary liquidation of a Kansas TEFI. So he suggested the legislature revisit that exposure. And then towards the very bottom of page 7, the committee heard from the Director of Legislative Affairs from the Department of Commerce. And they talked about their SEED program. I'm on page 8 now, the final page. They talked about their SEED program, which stands for Strategic Economic Expansion and Development Grant Program. And it's designed to award grants that support the economic revitalization of Kansas communities with population less than 5,000 people through investments in quality of life initiatives. The total amount of available funding is dependent on the annual assessments paid by each chartered TEFI. The director reported that the department was reviewing applications for its 3rd round of SEED grants, and then it details some of those numbers over the past years. And the final bit I want to cover are their actual recommendations. In that final column on page 8, the committee agreed to the following comments and recommendations reflecting its discussion. Liquidation. They recommended to explore updates to the TEFI Act as it relates to the voluntary or involuntary liquidation of a Kansas TEFI. The application fee, to consider a change in the application fee, to consider changes in the daily statement and monthly trust statement requirements, call report cadence, and lending limits, to consider updates to the definitions of alternative assets and alternative asset custody accounts to reflect continued modernization and digitalization of asset ownership, and for charities to revisit the provisions of SB 204, and to consider the OSBC's authority to examine the financial aspects of TEFIs for safety and soundness, to reach out to other financial institutions to determine why the industry has yet to grow, and to finally consider the longevity of the committee itself and whether it remains necessary. That concludes my overview of the report. I will stand for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicole, for that presentation. Committee, do we have any questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Okay, so thank you for your presentation. I served on this joint committee, and I'm just trying to remember how that 2.5% is divided up. Is the Beneficient Health Foundation, or whatever that first foundation was, is that the investment into Heston, or does that fall under the portion that's given through the Department of Commerce?
I believe it's the Beneficent Heartland Foundation that directs the funding to Heston. I'm not sure how that foundation is set up, but that is the piece that goes to Heston directly.
Okay, and that isn't set up under the Department of Commerce at all?
I believe it is not.
I had one more question, but, whenever we talked about, I think it was Beneficent that came and said if we, lowered the entry fee of like, what is it, $2 million, and they listed some guardrails or whatever of opening the opportunity of having 2 more TEFI businesses. Is anyone from the OSBC here? I didn't know if those 2 names ever came to surface or if that information was ever presented in the joint committee.
At the time of the hearing, the OSBC said that they had not heard from any potential applicants or any inquiries, but I will defer to them if they have a member in the audience.
I think maybe there is someone.
Would you like to come on up from the OSBC? Thank you.
Hi, Brock Rayler, General Counsel for Office of State Bank Commissioner. I'll reiterate the Commissioner's comments that we have not received any official inquiries even since the last Joint Committee hearing.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up and answering that question. That's all.
Okay, committee, anybody else? Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Mike, our Representative King.
Yeah, a quick question. Of the 2.5% that's gone to Commerce Department, what was the total dollar amount of that? Do you have that here? And I apologize if it's in the report. I forgot my computer.
Oh, yeah. I have a couple printed copies. I meant to say that at the very beginning. If my colleague would like to pass you one. It's on page 8. I detailed most of the data that the director shared. And so it would be annually. I think I didn't pull everything from their slides, but the first year's funding to the department was $2.7 million. And I believe the past 2 years it was $270,000 each year. So 2.7 million and then 270 and then 270,000.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I am from Heston, so if anyone would have any questions, they can speak with me about that later then.
Great. Thank you, Representative King. Okay, committee, anyone else? Going. Okay, I have one comment. BFF, having teenagers, has a whole new meaning to me.
Yeah.
I had that stuck in my head throughout. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your report. Okay, next we have a report from Mike Ditch from the Special Committee on Centralized Pooled Collateral and PMIB Modernization. I cannot say that this morning. Okay, thank you, Mike.
Vice Chair. Good morning, committee members. I'm Mike Ditch with Legislative Research. I'll be reviewing the Special Committee on Centralized Pool Collateral and PMIB Modernization, as well as the Joint Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Benefits 2024 interim reports. You should have the full reports in front of you, so I'd like to just direct your attention to a few topics of interest for the committee. Related to that Special Committee on Centralized Pool Collateral and PMIB Modernization, as noted on the report's first page, the committee was directed to study the centralized pool collateral for public funds and pooled money investment board known as PMIB, linked deposit loan modernization, as well as the potential impacts of this increased investment in Kansas communities. I'll refer you to the report to look at the testimony. The recommendations that came from the committee discussed the need to keep local government funds within local communities while maintaining as much free enterprise as possible and not mandating maximum or minimum interest rates to be paid for any deposits. Committee also discussed the likelihood that Kansas could benefit from modeling its linked deposit loan programs after those offered by neighboring and surrounding states. And if you'll flip over to page 0-3 of the report, the committee recommended 2 pieces of legislation. First one was the committee recommended a bill reworking all state-linked deposit loan programs to remove outdated restrictions and improve the competitiveness of Kansas programs, including considering programs adopted by neighboring states. This proposed legislation ties directly to that last recommendation in the shaded list area on that second page. Second, the committee recommended a bill incorporating the remaining committee recommendations. These would be the remainder of the recommendations in that shaded list area and include the following: creating a centralized collateral pool program, changing statutory rates and the legislative intent about negotiating rates that differ from statutory rates, ensuring public entities are abiding by laws related to the deposit of public funds, clarifying municipal bond sale proceeds must be treated the same as all other public deposits, and prohibiting third-party investment advisors from being eligible to actively invest public funds for which they're advising. Additionally, if you flip to the last page, 0-6, you'll see the committee recommended the bills be prepared in conjunction with the Kansas Banker Association representatives and be introduced by this committee during the 2025 legislative session. I'll refer you to the full committee report and minutes to look at any testimony and the full text of the recommendations. Would you like me to stop here for questions on that committee or go ahead and start on the next one?
Committee, do we have any questions?
Switching over to the Joint Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Benefits report, as noted on the first page, the committee was directed to monitor, review, and make recommendations regarding investment policies and objectives formulated by the Kansas Public Employers Retirement System, or KPERS, along with other duties identified in KSA 46-2201. In addition to these statutory duties, the committee was directed to consider the following pension matters: implementation of 2024 HB 2711, which addressed working after retirement changes, lump sum death benefits for KPERS retirees, revision of the statutory cap on alternative investments, KPERS board investment policy, and the Countries of Concern Divestment Act. The committee was also directed to study possible options related to KPERS Tier 3 plan design and its overall benefit value. You flip to page 0-4 in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll find testimony from KPERS Chief Investment Officer related to HB 2711. That bill created the Countries of Concern Divestment Act. It was enacted last session, and it was indicated the system identified and liquidated 12 securities of 10 companies found to be subject to the divestment under the Act. You flip back to the previous page, 0-3 of the report, you'll see the committee did not propose any legislation, but did submit the following recommendations. To have the House Committee on Appropriations and Senate Committee on Ways and Means consider transferring $1 billion from the State General Fund to the KPERS Fund to make an additional contribution toward the reduction of the KPERS unfunded actuarial liability. To have the House Committee on Financial Institutions and Pensions and Senate Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance continue to research, study, or review the following items: the Deferred Retirement Option Program, or DROP, including advantages and disadvantages of expanding the program; cost of living adjustments, or COLAs, including the fiscal impact of implementing a COLA; and potential enhancements to the KPERS Tier 3 cash balance plan. The committee further recommended that any changes to KPERS 3 be financed at the time of enactment and to not increase the unfunded actuarial liability. I'll refer you to the full committee report and minutes to look at testimony and the full text of the recommendations. It's a brief overview of the two interim committees. I appreciate your time. I'll stand for any questions.
So much for that presentation. Committee, do we have any questions? We all stay up too late last night. Okay, thank you, Mike, so much for that. All right. I don't think. Okay, that was short and sweet. Okay, next committee meeting will be Wednesday, January 29th. We'll have a KPERS update with Alan Conroy, the director. Anything else? All right. Okay, we are adjourned.